off another round of negotiations today before a new round of tariffs kick in 10 days.
China would like not for that to happen, so I think they're trying to move fast so that doesn't happen. But we'll see what happens. I can only say that the talks with China on trade have gone very, very well.
Trump saying the March 1st deadline isn't a magical date. There is some wiggle room to delay the deadline, but still there's a lot at stake. If talks derail and the deadline drops, both delegations want to dodge a 15% tax increase on $200 billion of imports from China. That's set to go into effect on March 1st. Charles?
Hillary, thank you very much, folks. That does it for me here. Remember, though, catch me tomorrow on the Fox Business Network at 2 p.m. Eastern for Making Money. That's my job. That's my goal. That's the name of the show. Please tune in. The 5 starts right now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dana Perino along with Katie Pavlich, Juan Williams, Lawrence Jones, and Greg Gutfeld. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The 5. Bernie Sanders is back. The Vermont senator jumping in the race for president. Sanders came out swinging in his announcement, taking swipes at President Trump and promising to finish what he started during his 2016 run.
Together, you and I and our 2016 campaign began the political revolution. Now it is time to complete that revolution and implement the vision that we fought for. Our campaign is not only about defeating Donald Trump, the most dangerous president in modern American history. It is not only about winning the Democratic nomination and the general election. Our campaign is about transforming our country.
But does Sanders have a better shot this time around? The self-described socialist says his progressive agenda is becoming more popular amongst Democrats.
Many of the ideas that I talked about, Medicare for all, raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, making public colleges and universities tuition-free, all of those ideas, people will say, oh, Bernie, they're so radical, they are extreme. The American people just won't accept those ideas. Well, you know what's happened in over 3 years? All of those ideas and many more are now part of the political mainstream.
Sanders is also taking shots at Howard Schultz, accusing the former Starbucks CEO of blackmailing Democrats. He claims that Schultz is threatening to run as an independent in order to force Democrats to choose a more moderate candidate.
Why is Howard Schultz on every television station in this country? Why are you quoting Howard Schultz? Because he's a billionaire, all right? There are a lot of people I know personally who work hard for a living and make $40,000, $50,000 a year, who know a lot more about politics than, in all due respect, does Mr. Schultz. But because we have a corrupt political system, anybody who is a billionaire who can throw a lot of TV ads on television suddenly becomes very, very credible.
Okay, the moment we've been waiting for, Greg. Bernie, he's back. He's running.
I'm very excited. Before I get into his chances, having a socialist call a capitalist dangerous is rich. The socialist who fails to see that his platform only ends in misery. Socialism is great at promising something, but has no idea how to fulfill the promise, which is why it always ends up in coercion, misery, and ultimately death. You can look at Venezuela, Cuba, Cambodia, East Germany, Ethiopia, Romania, Poland, USSR. The only sad thing is, all of socialism is ugly and disgusting, but Bernie is likable. He's like your crazy uncle who maybe washes his hair once a week, doesn't think it's valuable to wash more. But the conflict is within his own party. The left loves his ideas, right? Tax and spend socialist. But he has 3 strikes against him. Old, white, and male. He stinks of Bengay and Jell-O. In the intersectional beauty pageant, he's Coyote Ugly.
All right. Do you think, Lawrence, that he was underestimated in 2016, but now overestimated in 2020?
Well, I think he was underestimated, but I believe people should take him seriously because although he won't win, it's a bigger move in play. For example, people thought his ideas were funny before, but then you got the AOCs of the world. You got the Presleys, the Tlaibs. So this new freshman class showed that you can actually get elected on running on these policies. But I have to blame Democrats for that because they didn't define their message. They didn't connect with voters. And so Bernie saw a void with the American people, and he connected connected with those people, much like how we got Donald Trump, because the Republican Party, the traditional Republicans, didn't connect with the people at home. And so they wanted someone that was going to make radical changes. They may not win a presidential race, but in the next 20 years, they may be at play.
Juan, is Bernie in some ways this time around a victim of his own success? Because he ran and he got all the Bernie bros were so excited, and then he gets frustrated because the superdelegates, and now he basically has people that support his ideas, but the DNC has changed the rules. If you're going to run in the Democratic National Committee primary, then you have to register as a Democrat, something he has actually never done.
No, I think he will play. Let me just say, I think that the question is, does he register as a Democrat? It's an interesting one for me, because I think for him it would be an identity shift.
Yep.
I mean, he's always been the Vermont socialist. And I think it's added to part of his allure in that he's willing to go there and not respond to the taunts from the far right about socialism. And by the way...
Or just normal people.
No, I don't think normal
people know socialism. It's not a taunt. It's a reality that's ended in death.
No, I don't think you want to say that there are no normal people in Denmark, Norway, England, Germany, France. There are lots of people there. And I don't think you want to say it's not normal people in the United States who back Social Security, Medicare, VA, or
that's socialism.
All subsidies,
that's socialism.
All the government making decisions about how to help people get through this life.
It's in a decentralized system. It's
yes,
different.
That's right. So guess what? You want to label all these programs socialist, but maybe they're not. Maybe they're for people in our country, Greg, who are struggling with their finances.
I am for a safety net. I'm not for socialism.
Speaking of social security.
But there's a difference at a time when we have rampant income inequality in this country.
What does that mean?
I'll tell you what it means. I'll tell you exactly what it means. It means, Lawrence, when you think about it, it's something like 0.6% of Americans right now, the top 1%, have more wealth than the bottom 60%.
But they're there for 1 year.
But you painted it as
They're there for 1 year.
Let Katie have the
Before we get to a break, can I say something? First of all, Juan, you're wrong. There are more millionaires and billionaires now than there ever have been, but the middle class and the medium income has gone up, and the gap has actually closed between the rich and the poor. Back to Bernie Sanders.
Okay, go ahead.
He's an authentic guy.
Talk about covering over reality. The reality is that right now, I just did this last week in a column,
okay,
and it said 7 million people right now in our country, 3 months behind on car payments. 40% of the country can't afford an emergency $400 expenditure.
There are 6 million jobs that are unfilled right now in America. There are 6 million jobs that are unfilled right now in America. AOC just ran Amazon out of New York, which was going to pay people $150,000 a year. But back to Bernie Sanders. He's an authentic guy selling a fraud. It's a shame he doesn't wash his hair that often, because he has lots of bathrooms in 3 different homes to wash his hair, right? This is a guy who is claiming that the government can take care of you, who back in his early days of his socialist screed said that bread lines were a representation of a good government functioning. People actually standing in line and waiting for bread in places like Nicaragua and South America. He wants that kind of socialism. So when you bring up European-style socialism, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about Bernie Sanders, who has embraced Venezuela, embraced Cuba, and has said the definition of a good economy is when people are standing in line begging the government because they were starving for some bread or some soup, whatever's left over.
No, what he's saying is a government that responds to human need is a good government.
Okay.
But you know what
a government that allows people to get what they want and would need on their own is a better government.
No, I'm all for it. But when you are in a situation like we're in America today, when you have heightened income inequality,
what has the New Deal done for American poverty in this country?
And by the way, Lawrence is on to something. Don't ignore what he said about Bernie being the exact opposite of Donald Trump. The populist energy in the country.
I'm going to ask Greg one more question. I'm not going to ask if I can. Okay, so one of the things he says about Howard Schultz, he said he's trying to blackmail the Democrats, right? Because if I run and he runs, and basically he's going to try to split us. That's blackmail, which I think is a little bit of a strange thing for him to claim.
And it's racist.
But couldn't you also say that when the Democrats are frustrated at Howard Schultz, and they say you're going to help Trump win re-election, couldn't it also be said that, no, Bernie, you're going to help Trump win re-election?
Absolutely. The best thing that could happen for Trump is for Bernie Sanders to get the nomination, to put an actual bona fide socialist up against a capitalist in a country that created the greatest economic system known to man. What an education it'll be for people in college and high school to learn about what socialism has done in all of these countries. And he's not running just against Trump. He's running against Venezuela. Right. Because while he's out there, Venezuela will be crumbling. God knows what it'll be like in 2020, whether it'll be there or not. So
Come on, baby. Let's do the twist.
Former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe making even more explosive claims. McCabe saying now that top congressional leaders did not push back when he told them the FBI was investigating President Trump.
The purpose of the briefing was to let our congressional leadership know exactly what we'd been doing. Opening a case of this nature, not something that an FBI director, not something that an acting FBI director would do by yourself, right? This was a recommendation that came to me from my team. I reviewed it with our lawyers. I discussed it at length with the Deputy Attorney General, and I told Congress what we had done.
Did anyone object?
That's the important part here, Savannah. No one objected.
McCabe also defending his former colleagues, Lisa Page and Peter Strzok, against accusations of having anti-Trump bias.
Lisa Page and Pete Strzok are good people who served this country well. They made some poor decisions in their private lives and in terms of the communications they exchanged with each other. That's brought incredible grief and scrutiny on the FBI. I'm sure they regret that, but good people make bad decisions every day.
What do you think?
I think lots of things. First of all, I can't believe Rod Rosenstein kept his job after all of this time. I'm surprised he wasn't fired. The only reason that probably didn't happen is because of the politics surrounding this. But my big question for Andrew McCabe, which hasn't been answered, is what was the insurance policy? They talked about this. Peter Strzok and Lisa Page met in his office to discuss these things. What was the insurance policy? And there aren't any questions to Andrew McCabe about FISA abuse. He's been accused by the president of breaking the law. Whether that's true or not, we'll find out. He has been referred for criminal investigation for lying. But the big question is, did you break any laws when it came to getting information about the Trump campaign? How did you get the information from the dossier? And do you regularly use political documents from opposition research firms paid by opposing political parties to launch counterintelligence investigation?
Wait a second. I asked you what you thought about what he had to say, but I understand your defense. But I mean, obviously, he was interested in starting an investigation that couldn't be undermined or ignored if he was fired by the president. So I think that's what he meant.
He also said in a previous interview that he was trying to make sure that the Russia investigation was on solid ground.
That's what I'm saying to you.
And so far, they've had
no
solid ground when it comes to actual Russia. They've had solid ground when it comes to personal crimes, tax fraud, taxi fraud in New York, but when it comes to Russian collusion, they've had nothing.
So, Lawrence, when you listen to this, and especially when you listen to him say that members of Congress had no objection to the FBI's actions, what do you think?
It's not surprising at all. A lot of these people have been for the FBI abusing their power for a long time. My question for you, though, Juan, is as a Democrat, you guys used to stand with us libertarians on questioning the authority, the size and scope of the FBI and the intelligence community, on spying on Americans, going after on these witch hunts without any evidence. Why the sudden change?
Because there's a real threat, and I think that's what he said.
You don't know what the threat is.
Well, no, no one
has identified it. There's been no evidence of it. But you go on these fishing expeditions, and Democrats were against this.
No, Democrats were against
Democrats have always stood with libertarians on the size and scope of the FBI and any other law enforcement community.
Not in this case.
Yes, exactly. No. Because it's Donald Trump.
No, because there was a threat. The president was a puppet of the Russians. But let's move on.
Wait, I got to address this because you're talking, we're sitting here, we're talking about this so-called real threat. This was a destructive narrative that essentially hypnotized a large group of the public. In this case, this fella's selling a book, which is, again, money milked out of conflict. But the fact is, the narrative created this. The narrative was it was inconceivable that Trump could win, so it had to have been Russian collusion, and he is a dangerous man and a threat to this country. So I want to look at this narrative that we keep hearing about. The narrative is Trump is mentally unstable, a Russian puppet, and a bigot. You have seen what he's done to Russia, right? Through Iran, through Venezuela, what he did to the diplomats, what he did to the oligarch list, the missile treaty. He's no friend to Russia. You look at bigotry right now. They are launching a global initiative to end criminalization of homosexuality. If that's bigotry, Trump is the worst bigot on the planet. You want to talk about unstable? This is the most stable economy we've had in decades. We have low unemployment, which is beneficial to women and minorities. Another bigot, another terrible act of bigotry. Minorities are seeing jobs. The narrative does not match the deeds. But this is what happens when you live in your own movie. That guy, McCabe, lived in his own movie, and his movie prevented him from seeing the deeds that we now see. But now you're seeing it changing. You're watching people suddenly realize, holy crap, I've been living in a dream. This isn't real.
This sounds like what Matt Gaetz said the other day. He said, yeah, you know what? I don't feel bad that Congress, the Republicans in Congress, were acting to undermine the FBI in this investigation to help President Trump. You think, what? How can you say
That's
such
a movie.
thing? Yeah, it's a movie.
No,
It's
you're
no
in a movie.
It's no
You're in a movie,
when you
and
see
it needs
Trump having silent
and it's a
meetings,
PG.
getting everybody out of the room so he can talk to Putin. Not a movie. How about the facts?
You're a
but
movie.
Dana, let's talk about this. The president tweets, this guy can't go to the bathroom without command from leaking James Comey. What do you think?
Well, he is leaking.
I mean, I don't feel like, what was it? One of the presidential candidates says that they don't feel like a need to respond to every one of President Trump's tweets, and I definitely feel the same. I would say, look, I do think a lot of this does go back to Comey's early decisions about commenting on the Clinton investigation while it was ongoing and having this confusing stuff going on. And then, like, the FBI, who are really good men and women who work there, are like, well, wait, what are we doing now? We've never done that before. But also, the behavior of Hillary Clinton made them have to investigate a presidential candidate, and then there's a Russia stuff. So I feel like, in some ways, Comey is really at the center of all of this. And when the history is written on this...
Do you know what's never news? When someone in the news tells you the truth about the news.
And the media everywhere is mostly liberal. But in this country, 85% of journalists are registered Democrats. So that's just a fact, right? There's one Fox, and there's many, many, many more organizations on the left. But the problem is that the weight of all of these organizations on one side of the political spectrum, when you turn on your computer or you walk past the TV, if they're all saying the same thing, the weight of that convinces you that it's true. You don't question it because everyone is saying it. I didn't even notice that there was a bias in the media. You read one story after another or hear it, and it's all based on one anonymous administration official, former administration official, right? I mean, that's not journalism.
I could listen to that for hours. For us, this is an obvious truth. Yet the voice of the hive is so pervasive, it goes unheard, except we just heard her loud and clear. You already know what the media is thinking. Oh, FNC is going to eat this stuff up. You're right. So what? Because whenever the emperor's new clothes are exposed, don't expect the emperor to tell you about it. The conformist media will sweep this under a rug, so it's up to us to burn that rug, even if it's on top of Chuck Todd's head. For decades, the mainstream media defended their bias, saying they aren't liberally biased, just truth biased. And of course, the truth is always liberal, which is funny, because we've lost count of how many times the media has been dead wrong on so many things, from defending terrible institutions to reanimating bad ideas. The only reason they never get called out is because they run the calling out business. And so the ideas they love, born from teachers' lounges and safe spaces, continue to harm us, and there's no speed bump in sight. So forgive us if we find Logan refreshing. She told you what you know already. The media is about conflict. So there can only be two sides, the consensus among them and the marginalized you, and all those ad dollars which back the consensus that keep rolling in. The profit model for the news division isn't news, it's division, which is why in news there is no nuance. When it's embarrassing, there's not even news. It's either their side or the downside. All right, Dana, I think she should be hired by Fox immediately. What say you?
Well,
I thought it was a job interview.
She got the job. Oh, by the way, bad news, Juan.
Yeah, really. Well, then bring her in. You know, it'll just be a chorus. A Trump chorus.
Well, no, but you
not a
can't
Trumpster,
say that
Yeah.
because she actually says that she's realizing this, and you can't just dismiss her outright for saying that she's like, now she's part of the alt-right, Juan.
No, I thought
Hey,
Dana's Dana's turn to
Dana,
talk.
your question before I yell at Juan.
She is Generation X's Bernie Goldberg.
Ah.
So in 2001, Bernard Goldberg wrote a book called Bias.
Right.
He had just left CBS News. And what happened 3 years later after he published it? The Dan Rather piece, which is trying to take down George W. Bush so that with the fake documents about the military service. So she left CBS in 2018, and she's free, much like Bernie Goldberg became free.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like the scales drop from your eyes, and then you can see it, and you can say whatever you want. Besides, she did one of the best 60 Minutes reports. It was not about politics at all. She followed around this couple that focused on lions in South Africa. It was amazing. Yeah. Maybe Botswana, but it was amazing.
Interesting. I don't think Bernie would ever wear that dress.
Maybe not.
Maybe not.
Maybe not. But can I just say,
Yes.
the reason why she didn't realize that there was bias is because she was out there doing real reporting.
Yeah.
So the biggest criticism of her today is that some people are writing about this interview, which was done by Mike Ritland, who's a former Navy SEAL who served in Afghanistan and I believe Iraq as well. He runs the podcast called Mic Drop. She talks about all of these things she was doing. She's a woman in her 20s, single, went into Afghanistan alone at the time that 95% of the country was controlled by the Taliban. They were hanging women in the soccer stadium, and she was going in to do some real reporting. She lived in Iraq for 5 years.
She was attacked.
She was cleaning blood off of the equipment when her fellow journalists were killed. She was raped in Egypt. And yet these journalists and the media critics are all criticizing her for calling out and telling the truth when she is exactly what they claim to be. The one running into the fire like the firefighter, the one actually looking for the truth, the one doing the job and being on the front lines literally for her entire career. So I listened to the entire thing. It's a 3-hour podcast. I wish it wouldn't end. Her story, she's getting a lot of attention for the media bias comments, but the stories she tells about Afghanistan and Africa and war coverage are incredible. I really
subscribed to Mic Drop today on your recommendation.
There you go.
Well, I would
Very
say
good.
this to you. Gee, there are a lot of journalists who go into the war zones and who are often treated as, oh, just liberal media, but guess they're in war zones on a daily basis. They're there tonight. And the idea that she puts forward, oh, sources, just horse dithers, how ridiculous.
What do you mean?
Sources are so important for any working journalist.
She knows it because she
I'm going to
works
tell you,
with
they're very
Taliban
important.
sources in
and
Afghanistan.
she talks about, oh, well, you can only get the truth on certain conservative outlets. Well, what about, it's not just Fox, what about the Wall Street Journal? What about Drudge? Oh, my goodness, all #1, despite whatever she has to say.
You didn't say the truth, you said both sides of the story.
Well, I'm just telling you, it's out there. And we live in an era where there's lots of niche journalism, but she says, oh, you can't say that.
I'm surprised you're not defending them, honestly.
Do you want to hear what she says about Trump? And then this is she's talking about the coverage of Trump.
All the coverage on Trump all the time is negative. The former executive editor of the New York Times has a book coming out, Jill Abramson, and she says we would do, I don't know, dozens of stories about Trump every single day, and every single one of them was negative. She said we have become the anti-Trump paper of record. Well, that's not our job. That's a political position. That means we've become political activists, in a sense, and some could argue propagandists, right? And there's some merit to that.
I don't think there's any untruth there, Lawrence.
Yeah, it's total truth. But I think the interesting thing about this is that because he is the current president, I think people forget every Republican goes through this.
Yeah, that's true.
I just think that people hate him so much when it comes to the media that is so out in the open now. And quite frankly, I don't think the media really understands that they're picking a side right now. I think they're so blinded by their own disgust of the president and their own bias that they don't realize that they're picking a side. One last thing. I think people criticize Fox a lot, but there is a clear line at Fox. News division and opinion.
Right.
And that line, it's open. They tell you exactly what they're going to do. And I think that's unfair for people to compare us to the other network and say, oh, the opinion people aren't doing hard news. Well, their opinion.
CNN, I cannot find where the line is half the time.
There's none.
You watch Don Lemon and Chris Cuomo, and you can't tell if it's Abbott and Costello or straight news. I don't know. And I like Abbott and Costello. Don't get me wrong, Cuomo and Don. Talk to you later. All right, major update in the Jussie Smollett, whatever you want. What police are saying next.
Is in Chicago with the latest. Mike.
Hello, Lawrence. There's a lot of activity at the Cook County Criminal Courts building at 26th in California right now. And Rafael Weigel with our Fox affiliate WFLD is outside of the grand jury room where he says he has seen the attorney for the Osundario brothers go into the grand jury room. Her name is Gloria Schmidt. If you remember, the Osundario brothers were picked up as persons of interest, cooperated with police. They had a long interrogation and were released. And after that, the police said that they wanted to have a follow-up interview with Jussie Smollett. What we have been doing here in Chicago is waiting to see what will happen if they will submit to this follow-up interview. No movement out of the Jussie Smollett camp. Police said they had a reasonable amount of time before they did something else. We started hearing from a guy who knows a guy that they were going to go ahead and go with this grand jury, but now we've got our local reporters here confirming that the grand jury proceeding is now underway. The question, of course, now, do you get a true bill or no true bill? Attorneys say that they will indeed go pick up Jussie Smollett if it is a true bill, and we're waiting to watch that development. The other big development today came through a report through the Associated Press with neighbors in Smollett's building saying that they had seen the Osundario buildings in an elevator in Smollett's own building. The chief communications officer with the Chicago PD told our Matt Finn that they don't have any video of the Osundario brothers in the building with Jussie Smollett, and these Streeterville high-end condos, apartment buildings have tons of security, so that was largely debunked. But now that the attention is not turned to that report, the attention is at the criminal courts building at 26 and Cal to see what comes out of this grand jury. Lawrence?
Thanks, Mike. Well, Dana, the police have said he's no longer a victim in this case.
Now he's a suspect.
Yeah, you're the PR professional. I mean, what does he do now? I mean, because he's a liar.
I think, he's going to have to decide how to get right with God in his way. You know, he's going to ask for forgiveness, but he's got to get right with the people as well. And so he took resources away from the police department, and he also was willing to let innocent people go to jail and have their lives ruined so that he wouldn't get thrown off of a TV show? This is insane. And maybe he'll claim mental illness. Maybe he is mentally ill. I'm not exactly sure, but I do think about that he was willing to let innocent people take the fall for something like this. That is really beyond the pale, and I do hope that they prosecute him. Yeah.
Katie, some of the reports are saying that this started with a letter that he may have sent to himself, which could turn this potentially, we don't know, into a federal crime.
Self-mail fraud.
Right.
Self-mail fraud, yes. The evidence shows that the brothers may have been paid to write this letter, which Jussie went on national television to say that it had a stick figure hanging from a tree with a gun pointing out at it. It also had MAGA. So, to Dana's point, this is a guy who apparently made up this entire thing, took away resources, and then smeared an entire group of people who happened to be Trump supporters with the Make America Great Again slogan. And then all of his friends in the media, all of his allies in Hollywood amplified this fraud, and they haven't really apologized for it.
No apologies.
And they should.
Excuse me. Who do you think the reporters are that Mike Tobin was talking about? Those are reporters in the media who are telling
I'm not talking about the local reporters. I'm talking about the politically motivated activist Democratic media complex, which has amplified this story, and from the beginning said, "How dare you say allegation? How dare you doubt what this man is saying?"
I wonder which niche media is celebrating this like it's a triumph.
It's not a celebration; it's a vindication.
It's not a celebration. It's not a celebration, Juan, but what we do know is that the media rushed to judgment on this. A lot of the celebrities went to Instagram posting photos saying that they're sorry, that this is awful, when it didn't happen, and they should have waited to the facts. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, but I know a celebrity. I know Greg Gutfeld, and he didn't rush to judgment. Greg said we should wait, and I said we should wait. I think most people said, if this is true, what happened? By the way, NAACP leader, I think, said, you know, you can't treat him. He says he's a victim. You can't treat him as a bad guy and have all these political judgments being made about him because he said the guy was wearing a MAGA hat. Let's wait.
But you can go for the facts, just like the local journalists did in Chicago. Yeah. Talk to sources.
Yes.
What say you, Greg?
There's so many shoes dropping right now. I feel like I'm in a Foot Locker during an earthquake. So why would someone do this? Everybody can say, why would some successful, young, good-looking man do this? Because the behavior is rewarded by a salivating media. And what does it say to you when there are so many fake hoaxes going on? the demand for these stories by the media exceeds the supply. They can't find real hate crimes, so the media gins it up so that it creates this artificial conflict. They need a nation filled with oppressors oppressing the oppressed. And so this is why I think we're doomed, okay? It's a never-ending cycle. The media pushes the hate narrative, right? The people respond with fake hate crimes. The media eats it up, and then when you find out that they're hoaxes, the media just stops reporting it, and then it happens again. They get this hate crime amnesia. I will say this. I have a solution for Smollett and for everybody out there who does a fake hate crime. I've created a disorder that causes it. ASD, attention-starved disorder. Okay? That's what you got. That'll be your way out. We'll forgive you, but just don't do it anymore because this is going to destroy a country. You're trying to divide a country here. That's what the Smollett's big crime was, trying to divide a country and create a race war.
There's a spike in hate crimes in this country.
Not true.
According to according to the FBI,
American woman who joined ISIS and called for the murders of Americans is now begging to come back home, saying she made a mistake.
I don't know. I thought I was doing things correctly for the sake of God. And when I came here and I saw everything with my own eyes, I realized that I made a big mistake. And I know I ruined my future and my son's future, and I'm deeply, deeply regretting.
So, Lawrence, while this woman was overseas, she tweeted anti-American things, was trying to recruit other ISIS supporters. She went over there 5 years ago when ISIS was at its peak, the varsity team, and now that they're being completely demolished and squeezed out, she wants to come back to America.
Yep, and if she comes back, we're going to send her to Guantanamo and get all the information that we can get out. We don't negotiate with terrorists. You don't get to kill innocent people, then decide, oh, I was brainwashed into doing it. This is the problem, but you know what? We should set an example for her because there are a lot of Americans that are here that are homegrown terrorists that want to do the same exact thing. And I think the way to send a message is letting her come back and send her to Cuba.
Greg?
I just imagine when she comes here what her first job interview will be like. What did you do before you came here? I was in ISIS.
There's a gap in your resume.
And a resume under skills, you put beheadings. You know, I don't know how this is going to work. I don't want her back because we will celebritize her. Right. 60 Minutes, Good Morning America, then she'll be on TMZ. We're a fickle country, and if you look at Netflix, you have people swooning over Ted Bundy. And I don't want obscurity is what she deserves. I actually do believe in forgiveness, and people do bad things in war.
That doesn't mean no punishment, though.
But the problem with ISIS, it began at evil. It wasn't like she joined a revolutionary group and they turned to atrocity. They started at atrocity. So when she joined something that was atrocious. So she should die.
Well, Dana, she tweeted about killing Americans and other people who are westernized, saying go on drive-bys and spill of their blood, rent a big truck. I mean, we saw attacks in Europe of ISIS-affiliated people running over scores of people. I mean, she wasn't just someone who went over there to be an ISIS wife. She was clearly part of the recruiting and the advocacy for terrorist attacks in Europe and the United States.
And she speaks very well, and she sounds very humble, and you could get suckered into it. But I think there has to be consequences for terrorism. And I realize that she's a young mother, but look, she made a choice.
That's sexist.
The problem for us is going to be that this is not the only one. Besides, you have to punish this one.
Yep.
Because ISIS is not an isolated thing. ISIS is just one version. There's going to be another ISIS, and there's going to be another one, and they're going to start a caliphate someplace else. And then if she gets to come back and relive her life in Alabama, does that mean that, you know, people in the future, if they go to fight in the new ISIS, wherever that might be, that they get to come back too? I don't think so. But the world's governments can't say they weren't warned. 7 years ago, everybody talked about what are you going to do when these people go over there and there's no passport control and they're coming back, and now there's 800 of them over there, and the president is saying, you European governments, you're going to have to take your people back. Right. They're like, we don't want to take them back. Okay, well, you're going to have to take them back. The Kurds are saying, we're not going to hold them. So you're going to have to do something about them. This is, people usually work on a deadline. Like the deadline is now. They have no plan. But she's not going to be able to come back for a while.
Well, and speaking of consequences, the consequence for treason is death. What do you think the consequences for this woman should be?
I don't know that it's treason. I think she was an enemy of us, of the American people.
But she's an American.
She's an American. She's an enemy. She sided with the enemy. I don't know that she killed anyone, but you know what? President Trump, as Dana was saying, is urging the Europeans to take back former members of these terrorist groups and put them on trial. So I guess that's the standard that he would have adhere to this case.
I'm not here.
No?
Absolutely not.
Well, I mean, you take an enemy combatant to Guantanamo Bay.
Well, you could, but still they have a right to a trial.
And secondly, we got to be conscious of the ideology that she subscribed to. In her eyes, we're infidels, and we don't know
if
she's telling it. We don't know that.
Well, no.
She could be a sleeper cell coming to this country to commit another attack.
I think you have to, you know, the interesting thing about us as Americans is that we do believe in redemption.
But I would much rather take care of the refugees that are in that horrible situation in the refugee camp in Syria. I'd much rather take care of the people who are trapped and innocent, and they were trapped in the middle of that thing, than somebody who made a conscious choice. She lived in America, and she chose to go to Syria. That's a choice.
Bad move.
She's a traitor. Greg kicks us off very well. Go for it.
It's time for... Animals are great. Animals are great. Yes, it is. Animals are great. Animals are great. No matter how you slice them, animals are great. You know, you've heard about the food pyramid. This is, or the circle of life. This is the pyramid of death. Check this out. Here you got a cat. You got a cat eating a fish with the dog trying to get at the cat. I've watched this video on loop for almost 6 days. Sometimes I don't eat. Sometimes I weep quietly to myself. But look at that cat. Won't let go of the fish. And the dog's pulling on the cat's tail. You know, this is Shep was going to lead with this today, but I said, no, I get first dibs. Anyway, this is why animals are great. Animals are great. Animals are great. The producer told me that was too long.
Yeah. That's kids out there. Do you really want to see why animals are great? I will provide that for you. Look at this. Young Smiles is a dentist office in West Virginia, and it has a 4-legged employee that's been making these rounds and bringing smiles to patients. This is Tucker. He's a 1-year-old Labradoodle. He was rescued by Dr. Martin and her family just last year, and he's become a staple of the office. He helps keep patients calm and make sure everybody is like not going to freak out because they're going to be seeing the dentist. And they said that everyone's made friends with him. And one patient, 7-year-old Kaden, said that now she actually looks forward to coming to the dentist because of how much she loves dogs. So I'm recommending Dr. Tim Chase at In My Smiles, please, could you get a dog? Also, be sure to check out Jillian Caradelli on Fox & Friends tomorrow morning. She is going to be singing a live performance of her song, Good at Looking Good. And then we're going to see her tomorrow night performing as well. So check that out tomorrow morning. And next is Juan.
Oh, how about a moment of joy on the 5? This video is pure joy. That young man, Wyatt's 4 years old and has a spinal birth defect, spina bifida, but being limited to a wheelchair obviously didn't stop him from getting on the trampoline. And as you just heard, he's even telling the trainer, go faster. By the way, the video's gone viral, and the gym, TNT Kids Fitness and Gymnastics, is now getting requests to host more disabled kids. So while you may have gotten a kick out of that video, let me assure you, your kick is no match for Wyatt's thrill.
All right, Wyatt. I love that. All right, Lawrence.
Kids are great.
Speak for yourself.
Right. You may think that you like Beyonce or love Beyonce, but you have nothing on this little girl right here. You got to check her out. This is 2-year-old Baylor Mooney of Utah dancing like she's Beyonce while holding a corn dog. Look at the fan blowing her hair. She's dancing and she's eating just like Beyonce. A beautiful little girl that has so much spirit. Kids are great.
We need music next time, Lawrence.
Right.
Kids are great.
No. How dare you?
Katie.
That's great, corn dogs, because they have animals in them.
Yes.
All right, so you know that being a sports analyst seems like the coolest job in the world, but it comes with some hazards.
Tonight, we really go inside the glass, presented by Toyota. My goodness, Pierre.
Oh.
Didn't even flinch. That's NHL analyst Pierre McGuire. He found out Monday night that there is a thing as being too close. He was almost taken out by that flying hockey puck, lost a couple teeth, maybe a broken nose.
What a lost opportunity for a lower third. What the puck?
Maybe. What the puck? This is the Tampa Bay Lightning's home game against the Columbus Blue Jackets, which they won. Footage of the incident has gone viral. Gotta watch
This is why I don't like to go to baseball or hockey games.
Really?
I'm afraid I'm going to get hit in the face because I'm not paying attention. I'm talking too much.
That could happen at
He
the
was
mall.
watching the game. I was impressed. He didn't even bother him at all. He
That
just
happened
swung
here
on
at the
by.
Garden one day, and Walt Frazier, who's the announcer for the Knicks, said, a woman not paying attention to the game.
Walt, take it back, Walt. Set your DVRs. Never miss an episode of The Five. Special report is up next. Hey, Brett.
Hey, Dana, thanks. Senator Bernie Sanders launches his second presidential run, boasting more than 1 million activists across the country. President Trump denies he tried to get a loyalist appointed as the man in charge of investigations into his own conduct. And what would the Green New Deal do to America's economy? We'll take a look. This is Special Report. Good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Brett Baer. Bernie Sanders is giving it another try. The 77-year-old self-described Democratic socialist will run for president again as a Democrat in 2020. Sanders says since his failed attempt in 2016, many of his ideas have become part of the political mainstream. And he's promising an army of devoted grassroots followers will continue his crusade. The question is, does the party want him to be the standard bearer, or does it just gravitate to his ideas? Correspondent Peter Ducey is in Manchester, New Hampshire tonight.
It's below freezing in Burlington, but Democratic primary hopefuls are feeling the burn.
You're going to run for president.
I am going to run for president. That's correct.
And with that, Bernie Sanders started stitching back together a coalition that won him 13 million primary votes in 2016, since it only took 4 hours for 42,000 donors to send him $1.2 million.
Brothers and sisters, we have a lot of work in front of us.
Sanders says he sees an opening because almost all of the top-tier Democratic presidential hopefuls are pushing things like Medicare for all, which he did last time.
All of those ideas, people say, oh, Bernie, they're so radical. Well, you know what's happened in over 3 years? All of those ideas and many more are now part of the political mainstream.
The Trump campaign thinks that's good for Trump. A spokeswoman says Bernie Sanders has already won the debate in the Democrat primary because every candidate is embracing his brand of socialism. But one contender is careful not to get too close to Sanders.
I am not a Democratic socialist.
And another doesn't think everything Sanders supports, like tuition-free college, is realistic.
I wish if I was a magic genie and could give that to everyone and we could afford it, I would.
President Trump welcomed Sanders to the race today.
Personally, I think he missed his time, but I like Bernie.
But the feeling isn't mutual.
I think he is a pathological liar every day. He is telling one lie or another.
And that's a more direct approach than others are taking with Trump.
But if we as Democrats especially make it about him and not about us, make it about one office and not the cause of our country, we're making a very big mistake.
One of the president's loudest critics still has yet to announce Joe Biden, who spoke in Philadelphia today.
I don't begrudge anybody making $1 million or hundreds of millions of dollars, but I do think there's some shared responsibility. And it's not being shared fairly.
New DNC rules require that everybody who wants to run as a Democrat has to be a Democrat. And Sanders is an independent. But in New Hampshire, that shouldn't matter.
We in New Hampshire consider him a Democrat. He's been very supportive of our candidates and our party for decades. So, you know, he can call himself what he wants.
So the 77-year-old Democratic socialist thinks the second time is a charm.
What's going to be different this time?
We're going to win.
Even during the last campaign, President Trump sympathized with Sanders, saying he thought it was unfair that Democrats helped Hillary Clinton get the nomination. But while saying that, the president called him Crazy Bernie, one of the few Trump nicknames that might be grandfathered in to the 2020 race. Brett?
Peter Ducey in New Hampshire tonight. Peter, thanks. President Trump is once again being accused of trying to get a friendly face on the inside of investigations into his actions. He denies that. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts has the backstory tonight from the North Lawn. Good evening, John.
Brett, good evening to you. President Trump hammered his former Attorney General Jeff Sessions mercilessly for recusing himself from the Russia investigation. Now it's another recusal, that of the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, that has reportedly captured the president's attention. President Trump today denied that he ever tried to influence the widening investigation surrounding him in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan.
No, not at all. I don't know who gave you that. That's more fake news. There's a lot of fake news out there. No, I didn't.
According to the New York Times, as the investigation of Michael Cohen was hitting a crescendo late last year, President Trump reached out to his acting Attorney General, Matt Whitaker, to ask if the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Jeffrey Berman, could take charge of the investigations. Berman, who had been appointed by President Trump, had recused himself from the case. The Times reports Whitaker did not attempt to make a change. Just asking Whitaker to put a perceived Trump loyalist in charge of the investigation could have consequences for the president.
If you try to interfere with a criminal prosecution that may knock at your own door by putting your ally in there, that is clearly an attempt to obstruct justice.
In his appearance before the House Judiciary Committee 2 weeks ago, Whitaker was asked if President Trump had ever tried to influence an investigation.
And I have not talked to the President of the United States about the special counsel's investigation.
Today, the DOJ fell back on that testimony to deny the New York Times article, in a statement saying, under oath to the House Judiciary Committee, then acting Attorney General Whitaker stated that at no time has the White House asked for, nor have I provided any promises or commitments concerning the special counsel's investigation or any other investigation. Mr. Whitaker stands by his testimony. The Times also reported that when Whitaker did not ask Berman to unrecuse himself, President Trump, who had been bullish on his acting attorney general, suddenly soured on him. The president also denied that.
I have a lot of respect for Mr. Whitaker. I think he's done a great job. He's a very fine man.